show, and I am here with cultural commentator and former star of reality TV show Married at First Sight, Dean Wells. Dean, wonderful to have you here this evening. How have you been?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Always well.
Well, it's lovely to have you, and I'm keen to get your opinion on this because you've been very outspoken about the fact that the data on violence against women has been misrepresented. I can imagine there's been quite a response to that on the social media. How has all of that been?
Yeah, look, I've been pretty roasted for it by a lot of people. I've had quite a bit of support as well. I mean, I like to just divide everyone straight down the middle sometimes. But yeah, look, I have mainly a female following on my Instagram by far. Like 95% of my following is female. So as you can imagine, it's a very sensitive topic to that audience. And look, I don't blame them one bit for being quite emotional about it. I myself can be a bit of a robot and I can take emotion out of a situation. You know, men are usually better at doing that. And I like to take a step back and look at the reality and the numbers, because that's when you get to the real story, you know. But I've upset a lot of women and I've lost a few hundred followers in the last few days, put it that way.
Wow, but it is, as you say, you know, it's hard to, I think I must have been like a man in several other past lives, because I'm very like you, like I can look at this and this is it's a terrible
You're
tragic.
very analytical.
I'm very analytical. And I mean, like it's a terrible tragic situation, you know, the death of anyone by violence. But, you know, I sort of look at it in an emotionless way as well. And I do understand why that upsets people, because it is very upsetting, you know, and it's hard to be, you know, it's always a challenge to maintain the analysis with the sensitivity of it, I find. And look, one of the one of the commonly used lines that we hear is that violence against women is not just an issue for women to solve. But look, when people like you, a man, speak up and you're trying in a very logical way to make your own point, you're told you're not helping. So how can men actually be heard on this topic?
Yeah, that's a really good question, a really good point. And I find that there's this very oversimplified, I find it stupid way of looking at the situation where, and you hear this a lot from the feminists and a lot of people, well, it's a man's problem. It's men doing the killing. It's men killing women. And I'm just like, that is A, very oversimplified. B, it just goes without saying. Men are bigger, stronger, more violent creatures. Men also die from violence in so many other ways, such as suicide and war and dangerous jobs and all those things. So for me, that's just a moot point that men are going to be committing more violent crimes. And yes, of course, that means in the realm of killing women, but also killing men. And I find that men's voices do get drowned out because people can just always jump back to that fact that, well, it's men doing the killing, so you need to listen to us. Well, hang on a minute. Maybe we should be listening to men. Maybe instead of just throwing out these words like, oh, it's misogyny. And you hear that all the time. It's misogyny, it's misogyny, it's misogyny. I'm like, well, is it really? Like, listen to men. I don't think it is misogyny. I'm not misogynistic. Most of my friends are not misogynistic. I don't know anyone that's ever killed anyone. So I can't call anyone out. This is the other big thing they always say. It's like men need to be calling out people doing this. Well, I don't know anyone that's ever killed anyone. I don't know anyone that commits violence against women. I stand here right now and tell you I will call out any man around me that does that. And I do call out right now on this show, any man that harms a woman, you're a coward, and you deserve, you know, the full brunt of the law and society's pressures to come down on you. I condemn it in every single way. But maybe we should be listening to men and our mental health issues and everything else going on in our lives, and not just causing division by saying silly things like, well, it's a men's problem and it's misogyny. I think that just causes division and can cause even more anger and problems.
Yeah, because it is. It's a terribly tragic and also terribly complex issue. I mean, intimate partner violence, and I think it.
Yes.
You know, we all want to solve it. No level of it is acceptable either way. So just painting it as it's this abstract concept rather than looking at the real nitty gritty of poverty, mental health reasons, alcohol abuse, rather than looking to address those issues. That should be the practical thing to do. Now, like you've mentioned, male-on-male violence. I really want to chat to you about this because male-on-male violence seems to have a much lower classification of evil in our society, and yet we know that most homicide victims in Australia are male, 69% in fact, according to the recent AIC homicide report. So why does no one want to declare this a crisis?
Yeah, look, again, it's really hard to say. I think it's because women are more vulnerable. Like, let's face it, women are smaller. They have less ability and chance to be able to defend themselves against, a mentally ill, violent man. So in that respect, I kind of understand in some ways why it is more of an issue and why people want to focus a little bit more on women being killed by men. I kind of get that. And men, we are the stronger of the sexes. There's benefits to that, but we also need to take, some of the negatives away from that and be responsible for our actions. It's not to say that men dying is any less important, but and maybe there should be a bit more focus on that. And maybe there should be a bit more focus on why men are committing suicide. Like, when you look at the numbers, men are dying in general from violence, whether it's suicide or murder, a lot more than women. But no one really talks about that too much. And there's definitely no one marching in the streets, and you don't see Albanese out on his podium making sweeping changes based on, people being upset. But look, again, it's a difficult one, and I kind of see some reasoning behind why we do need to keep the conversation a little bit more focused towards women as victims. I can see some reasoning there. It is so complex, though.
It is, and look, you do make a good point. I mean, men, they are physically stronger on average. Obviously, they are more likely to commit violence because they are bigger and stronger, and they have more testosterone. So it is. I guess, people think, well, men beating up on each other, it's more of an equal contest on average, but a man beating up on a woman, well, on average, that's not going to be an equal contest at all. I mean, I think we can all agree that we all just want to stop violence in society. And you've mentioned, men's mental health and what goes on in their heads. Just before we go, I'll get a quick comment from you on this. I did an interview last week with a gentleman called Andrew Humphreys from the 1 in 3 campaign, which talks about male victims of domestic violence, and he also deals with women who are victims. And he said one woman had lived a miserable life of domestic violence. Her husband, who was an army veteran, had died, and she said to him, the army took away, she said, the army took away my beautiful young man and gave me back a monster. What, just in 30 seconds or less, what are your thoughts on that?
Look, that's a very interesting case, and I think it really speaks to, again, the way men are portrayed. On one hand, we're told we need to be these strong protectors. On the other hand, we're told there's toxic masculinity everywhere, and we need to be softer and more emotional. And I think men need to be men. There's nothing wrong with men being traditional men. And this is going to sound crazy. We need violent, strong-willed men to protect us from the other violent things happening around us in the world. We need men to be strong and tough and not violent against any other person. I mean violence in a way of being strong and being in boxing and lifting weights and doing, strong sports like playing rugby league. And that's a good thing for society. That's a great outlet for men. And exactly. We want men to be strong. That's just our nature. And then when men are seen as strong and tough, they get, accused of being misogynistic or toxic masculinity. So it is hard for men in this day and age. And I think there should be a bit more focus on what's going on in men's mental health. And, that's just all part of the conversation.
I
It
think
shouldn't just
so.
be focused in one direction.
I think so, yeah. If we really want to combat intimate partner violence and domestic violence, we need to look at all the facets that contribute to it rather than just labelling everything in broad brushstrokes, because that's not
Yeah.
going to help anyone. Dean Wells, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show this evening. This has been a really great chat.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your work, and keep it up.